PowerToFly.
We keep it pretty loose. So
Good. Maybe I didn't even read them. Who knows?
Keeps it fresh, keeps it exciting.
Exactly.
All right, we are
Meg, are you
live.
able to see us okay?
Oh yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
good.
yeah, looking good. Oh, this is a heads up. The only thing I won't have access to is if anybody messages you in the Zoom chat and messages you privately, I can't view those. So that's the only thing I wouldn't have the capability of seeing, but we don't expect you guys to check those like during the chat or anything like that.
Yeah.
That's a lot to ask of anybody. So don't sweat it. And I will handle the chat section of what's like, you know, either comes to me directly or is visible to everybody.
Cool.
Sarita has the coolest picture. I actually thought that was her sitting there for
Me
a second.
too.
looking at
I
us.
was just like, wait, she's not moving. Something's off here.
She's chuckling at us from the group chat. Sarita, your girl after my own heart. I'm on like the PowerToFly Zoom account right now, but my personal one has a very similar picture of me that I took where I was like, oh, I look really cute in that. Like, and it's like, you know, kind of professional, and I'll just use that for my avatar, not realizing that my boss thought I was smirking at somebody. And so like she let it go on for like 5 or 10 minutes during a meeting and finally messaged me and was like, what's so funny? And I was like, what are you talking about? She's like, oh, that's a picture. I'm like, yeah. She goes, I thought you were smirking at me this whole time.
That's funny.
Like, no, it's just how my face looks when I'm not frowning.
This is my favorite.
All right, so while we've got another minute and a half to go, I'm gonna try crowdfunding something or crowdsourcing something with you guys. If anybody has watched any really good movies lately, can you throw that into the Zoom chat or like, you know, feel free to come off mute and suggest. I'm supposed to be having a date night with my husband tonight and I'm supposed to pick the movie and I have no idea what I want to watch.
I like Greyhound a lot on Apple Plus.
Is that any good?
Yeah, I was surprised.
Okay, well, that's on the list.
Yeah.
What's it about?
I think like during World War II, like the Battle of the Atlantic. Apparently they don't talk about that a lot in history. But it's like the convoys from the United States to like London, like getting supplies out there. So like the U-boats, the submarines for would like hunt the convoys and try to like blow them up. It's super cool. Yeah, I learned.
Well, heck yeah, that's going on my list for sure. All right, so it's 12 o'clock. I'm gonna start hitting record here and then we will get going. All right here. Okay, so welcome everybody. Good morning. What's today? Wednesday, I think. Yeah, happy Wednesday to everybody. Thanks so much for joining us. My name's Meg. I am part of the team here at PowerToFly, and I'm super excited to be your host today and to dig in on this really interesting topic with our guests, Kris and Jessica. So before we do, I'm just gonna real quick run through some of our housekeeping. If you've attended pretty much any of our virtual events lately, this is gonna be really repetitive, so I'm very sorry for that. Our biggest message is participation. Today is all about our community members. It's all about you all that have written in with questions that want to participate in today's chat. So to that end, please feel free to turn on your cameras if you'd like. I know I very much appreciate seeing new faces these days. You're more than welcome to come off mute to ask questions or to comment. The one thing we ask is that if anybody besides me is talking, please don't interrupt them. I love to be interrupted. Cut me off whenever you'd like. We try not to crosstalk and we try not to talk over anybody that's not me. Just as, you know, kind of a general politeness rule of thumb. Do our best with lag times, you know, we'll just do our best. The other thing to point out is that if you are actively speaking, like with voicing a comment or a question or, you know, engaging with one of our speakers or something, that's totally fine. But if you're not actively speaking, try and make sure you put yourself back on mute. If you have any kind of weird like, background noise happening in the back, it's not a huge deal. If I have something that I hear that's going to cut into other people's audio, I will mute people if necessary. But you are always welcome to come back off mute to ask your questions. This is not like, a lifetime ban from participating. So just keep that in mind as we go through some of these questions later on. If you don't have great audio, or you just don't really feel like coming on camera, or that's just not something you want to do, totally fine. You are still more than welcome to participate by putting any questions or comments you might have into the Zoom chat. Just make sure that you are sending to everyone. If you have a question that you would like raised anonymously, then you can select my name from the drop-down menu where it says everyone in the chat pop-out box. Select Meg, and you can send it to me directly, and that way I will be able to raise your question and keep you anonymous. For whatever reason, doesn't matter what why you'd like to stay anonymous, we always honor that. Today is being recorded, so even if you only have 5 minutes that you can spend with us, or 35, or you're staying for the whole hour, it doesn't matter. Everybody that registered for today's event will get an email in a couple days, usually 1 to 2 business days, with a link to rewatch the recording of today's event. So you don't have to take feverish notes. You don't have to worry about if you missed something. You can always go back and review it. And we are also streaming live to YouTube right now. So if you don't want to wait for the rewatch link, you can always go to our YouTube channel and check us out and check out the videos there. It'll be posted. I think it's running right now, and the recording will be posted as soon as we end today's session. Let's see. Last but not least, we have compiled all the questions that you all submitted prior to today's event, and we've condensed them down into kind of a conversational flow. We'll go over those real briefly before we start the question session. But if you have a question that even if it was something you pre-submitted, but if you have a question that you want answered today and you are here to ask the question, please feel free to go ahead and do that. If it fits in better with something we're going to talk about later, we'll touch on that, and we'll redirect and we'll revisit you later on. But otherwise, please feel free to participate whenever and however you'd like today. So without further ado, I would love to introduce you to today's speakers. First up, we have Jessica Reyes. Jessica is the Director of Product at CNN, where she develops personnel strategy that supports the overall business goals of the company. Additionally, she provides overall leadership and guidance to CNN's digital talent strategy team, which includes performance management, talent acquisition, learning and development, employee relations, organizational effectiveness, and other people practices. Reyes received a Bachelor's of Science in Communications from Florida International University. She's originally a native of Miami and now lives in Atlanta. So welcome, Jessica. And then next up, we have Kris. Kris Williams is an application implementation manager at CNN Digital and has been there for the past 3 years. She is responsible for delivery of their video products. Her passions include training and elevating project and program managers so that they can be effective in any type of organization. She's a graduate of Ohio State University, what's up, Ohio, for her undergrad, and currently completing her MBA at Louisiana State University with plans of teaching online in her spare time. Kris is a resident of Atlanta and enjoys visiting the local parks. So welcome and thank you for joining us, Kris.
You forgot to say the Ohio State University. No.
You know what? That's how you know that an Ohioan didn't write the deck, because it's usually either a capital T or a capital THE, Ohio State. All right. So as we get started here, Andrea is making enemies in the chat already. Shouting out "Go Blue." Those are some fighting words, Andrea. Okay, so as we get started here, before we launch into the questions, one thing I do want to call out, I'll put a link in the chat here real quickly, but you are more than encouraged to follow CNN on PowerToFly. They have a company page. They have open roles currently, and so we'll touch on that a little bit later in today's chat. But I'll throw the link into the Zoom chat so you guys can check out their page on PowerToFly. You can check out their open roles, you can follow them, and doing so puts you on their follow network, which alerts you when they have new roles posted or when they're going to participate in events like today, things like our virtual job fair, the diversity summits that we're going to be holding coming up. If they're going to participate in things like that, that'll be a good way for you to stay updated on those developments. So last but not least, like I said, we arranged your questions into a conversational flow. So I'm gonna hold on this page for a couple seconds here. Please feel free to take a screenshot if you'd like. You don't have to, like I said, you don't have to take notes, but some of our more type A attendees appreciate knowing what questions are coming down the pike. So please feel free to take your screenshots if you'd like. I'm going to change us to our next screen here, our next slide, I'm sorry. Here's our page 2 of our questions. This will give you an idea if you have a question that occurs to you while we're talking, and this will help you kind of see if maybe we're going to touch on something similar later, or if nobody's going to, if it's not on our radar at all, then by all means, please feel free to jump in and ask questions or add comments. So to get us started with our first question, this person wrote in asking, how has CNN and your team been affected by this pandemic? How have you had to adapt your strategy to creating successful remote teams and launching your products?
So,
Kris, or do you want me
yeah,
to
I'll take the first stab.
go for it?
So we were already pretty much largely working from home anyway, as we have team members spread throughout the US, and we also have team members in London. So we've gotten really good at leveraging our online tools. However, during the pandemic, we did put some additional practices in place. Like now we have more cultural or team culture type of events, such as coffee times where we all just get together just to relieve some stress and have some general conversations. We've created community Slack channels for anyone to share their frustrations or anything they feel like sharing. So it's definitely much more collaborative. We also have virtual team building events that Jessica helped us set up, and that went really well. And then in addition to that, our HR team is really supportive. So they've worked with us to make sure that all of our team members have everything they need to be successful working from home, including all of the equipment that they need, our internet connections are stable, and things like that.
I just want to throw out one point. Like, I think, at least for me, and I've seen in other people, like, we've definitely learned empathy for those who have worked remote, before the pandemic. So before it used to be, the majority of people in a conference room and then maybe one person remotely in Wisconsin. And you had no idea whether or not the person can see you and hear you, just like carry on your conversation. And now we're realizing, like, whoa, it's actually pretty difficult to do these calls 24/7, like back to back to back to back. Like, when do people have time to eat? When do they have time to go to the bathroom? So yeah, definitely learning empathy.
I'm always really interested to hear from people that had to make that rather abrupt switch, just because the pandemic happened and I'd already been working remotely for about a year. So it was, and plus we have a remote distributed team. So it's kind of interesting to hear from people who had to make that shift, but it's nice to know that you guys already had a bit of a groundwork kind of laid out since you are used to working with global teams.
Yeah.
That's nice. All right, so for this next question, this person asked, what tools are you now using to manage the product launches with your remote teams?
Yeah, I mean, that's great. And I'm sure Kris can elaborate a bunch on that. The one thing I'll say, like, from product perspective, we started using Miro a lot to work out workflows and even like ideate and brainstorm. It's been a blessing to us because everything is in real time. But we also use Jira. And then Kris, like, whatever else, you're the master of the tools.
Yeah, I think the main thing in terms of tools is making sure that the tools are collaborative that we use. So I know several of you use Google Docs. Well, internally, we use collaborative documents like Paper or Confluence. Some of us use SharePoint. And then in addition to that, the messaging platforms are critical now, like Slack. So we're heavy Slack users. And for our visuals, in terms of the virtual conversations, we're using WebEx. We're also getting into Microsoft Teams. And so as we utilize different tools, we're just evaluating different things to determine what works best for a particular team. Also trying to spread our bandwidth a bit so that we aren't overloading any one particular team, so that the connections are a bit more stable.
We started working
to call out too.
Kris.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was saying Kris has also started doing some work in Monday. So
yeah.
Maybe that will be a new tool that we all start using.
I think it's a good thing to call out that you have to kind of reevaluate what the load, like the lift load is on various teams, especially when you have a change like this, because something that seemed like an even, either responsibility distribution or tasks or, time spent in a day doing whatever, what seems, kind of evenly distributed in one situation might completely change, especially with a shift like the pandemic. So
Right.
I think that's a really good thing to call out that people don't really think about, because they just think, oh, we'll just do it in a different location. It's like, well, but there's different hoops you might have to jump through that you didn't have to before, or stuff that, problems that might go away if you are now out of the office.
Right. And I don't think our virtual platforms had time to prepare, right? They didn't know this was coming. Take Zoom, for example. I'm sure Zoom had to beef up in order to support everyone. So we're trying to spread the load so that we can ensure a better connection for the teams.
Absolutely. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. You all were in the midst of a redevelop of your video product before the pandemic, correct? So what was the plan looking like? Let's just pretend the pandemic never happened. What was the plan looking like in terms of how much was it going to be a full overhaul? Was this going to be kind of a team specific thing? Just to give kind of people a little bit of a baseline to understand some of the changes that you made in light of the pandemic towards an already existing plan or already existing transition period.
Yeah, so right before the pandemic, the video team was known as the video services team, which in the name, it says, who we are and what we do. We're a service. When in actuality, we want to think more holistically about just video in general. And if you think beyond being a service to other teams so that they can get video up on the site or on applications like mobile apps or TV apps, if you start thinking about the experience that users have and the journey that they go through to find the video, and then as they're consuming the video, like what's the experience? We started redefining ourselves to the video experience and platforms teams, where we said, hey, we don't want to make one-off things. We want to create a platform that can be used everywhere. But we also want to really know the user from the moment they choose to become a video user, right? Because I can either, if I go to a page, read text on an article, or I can watch a video, or I can do both, but there's a choice that you make. And once you make that choice to become that video user, then what's the journey that you're going through? So now we're looking from that start to that end, and hopefully that they keep coming back and back and back. And I don't think Kris, correct me if you feel differently, that the pandemic has deterred us away from any of that. In fact, we're just recognizing more and more yeah, this is totally the right path.
Right. If anything, it gave us more fuel as more users are staying home now, watching videos. So we're able to do a lot more testing now. So now this is on the bright side, this is allowing us to get more information. So.
Yep.
And that is a really interesting thing, especially as we start seeing people saying that they've got, the idea of Zoom fatigue has been a very, not that it's a hot topic, but the phrase has been pretty hot in the last couple of weeks. And I don't know if you guys have seen this, but, as far as our events go, we've seen a little bit of a drop because it's summer and people are tired of being tied to screens for a while. But have you seen that extend to stuff like your mobile offerings, or is it more that people are having Zoom fatigue, not necessarily screen fatigue?
Yeah, I think in that, we haven't seen a drop in viewers. In fact, we're seeing an increase. Of course, there's so much news going on. But I think my opinion on that about Zoom fatigue is, I've actually read a couple of articles because I feel bad all the time, is that you're always on. I have to focus 100% on this. And it's exhausting. And I think when you're consuming video in other venues like CNN or wherever, or on television, it's more of this lean back experience where I can do two things at once, which I do. I'm always on my phone, on TikTok, I'm obsessed and just scrolling through. And I can also kind of sort of pay attention to what's on TV. But when you're on a Zoom call, I have to pay attention and people can see me. And if I don't show my video, then what does that mean? People are going to think that I'm not actually there or that I'm not paying attention.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to differentiate, right? It's one of them is more of a passive participation and one's more of an active that definitely requires, that it requires that involvement, not only in like, that you've got your ear cocked and listening to see if you're going to get called on or something, but yeah, it provides this very odd magnifying glass feel, even though you might be one of, 20 or 30 people on a Zoom call that all have their cameras on. So yeah. All right.
My favorite part though
ahead,
about all this is I get to see other people's houses. So the other day I got a tour of Kris's house and it's just beautiful.
You know what? I am honestly in the same boat where like I said, I've been doing this for a while. Every coworker I have is remote, but it's been really interesting to get that inside look into, how other people live and what their home life is like and what their office looks like, or wherever they're working currently. So it's one of those things I like to talk about a lot, especially right after the pandemic started. It's not that people are getting less professional. We're just getting a lot more real about what work looks like and what that can look like in the future. And the idea that like you might not have the perfect, Instagram setup behind you, and you might not have like this like gorgeous sun-drenched office to do all of your work in. You might be at a kitchen table or on the couch or on a coffee table or whatever, but it doesn't negate your capabilities. It doesn't negate the quality of the work that you can produce. And it helps also kind of highlight to people that like we might all be going through this pandemic together, but your experience might not really mirror what mine is. So it gives you that extra ability to empathize. I can't English today, I'm sorry guys. Empathize with people. All right, so for one of our next questions, this person asked, since people aren't working in offices anymore, how have you and your teams been managing and maintaining good employee relations within your department?
You want to take this one? Okay, I gotcha. All right, so we actually have several different groups that assist with that. So we have what we call business resource groups. They are focus areas based on your interests or say your demographic. And so you're able to step away from work and just collaborate with people that have a similar interest and talk about those interests. For example, we have a knitting club. And there are several different groups like that allow people that relief. In addition, we also have coffee times, things that I was talking about before. We've built out more of our Slack channels. It's really a lot more collaborative right now. One of the great ones is our working from home with kids channel, right? Because we have lots of employees that have young children and they run in the meeting up in the middle of a meeting and hop up, right? And so it's really great to understand, and we set that expectation up front. We realize this is a new normal for us and that our environment is going to have to change. And so, and it's okay. You don't have to apologize for it. It is what it is, and we will all help each other to work through it. So we haven't had any issues in terms of that where people are, that's been reported to my knowledge, where people are feeling overly obligated or stressed, and we just all take it day by day and understand that this is different. It's something that we need to work through together. Like, for example, I can hear my son singing right now in the background, and I'd love to be able to throw a shoe at him, but I can't do that. So, it's it's just the new world that we're working in. So.
Yep, that flexibility is absolutely key, especially when it comes to working parents. I think this is highlighted for me more than ever that like I truly do not understand how some of my colleagues get stuff done. I don't. I'm responsible for me, 2 bulldogs, and I sort of make sure my husband also doesn't die on a daily basis, but like I can barely manage that. And so the idea that there are people out there doing their jobs and also caring for tiny humans is more power to you, man. All the respect in the world. Okay, so can you describe how the product lifecycle framework can be made lean with the current agile process for development?
Oh, Kris, that's all you.
I gotcha. So we've actually, even prior to the pandemic, we have been working really closely on streamlining our processes. So we're utilizing a lot of the lean principles of eliminating waste. And that is even more critical now that we're working from home and have shared responsibilities with our personal lives. So that means like streamlining our handoffs between different functional areas, reducing the amount of time that it takes for code reviews and things like that, proactively working with external teams to let them know that hey, we have a dependency or we may need your help in the next month or so. So let's work together to make sure that that happens with no delay. So we've definitely slimmed down our processes in order to be as efficient as possible. We also perform regular health checks with our teams and conduct waste exercises where we actually like walk through the workflow that one ticket follows or one work item follows from beginning to end to see where we have any wasted time or any areas of improvement. And then we work together with the whole team to come up with a solution for reducing that and monitor it on an ongoing basis to make sure that we did make that change and it is having the impact that we're looking for. So we work really hard to remain as lean as possible.
I love that idea of like kind of tracking the life of that ticket to look out for redundancies or things that could maybe be done in a better way or faster or cleaner or whatever. I haven't worked in a lot of places that have done that. I've worked in a couple, and it's definitely one of those things that you need to set aside time for sure. But it's so crucial, and it can help save you so much time later on that I feel like people don't really value that as much as they could. Reevaluating, especially when you have a situation that has multiple people involved in a single project, it's always a good idea to keep kind of doing health checks on those processes to see, are we doing this in the best way possible? Have there been situations that arose that required special treatment until we changed how we did it and then we never went back, or whatever. So yeah, we've got a question from Beth in the chat. Beth is asking, are you finding that career paths and promotion opportunities are different with everyone being remote now? Has the evaluation process changed at all?
I think there's a layer of difficulty added. Like for example, we're all remote now. You don't get the same kind of face-to-face time that you usually might have with some of those people that would be involved in a promotion. I think it all comes down to like the effort you make to keep those connections. As far as an organization, like, no, I mean, I haven't seen it impact any promotions, which is a good thing, right? Like that means that we still very much value the talent and make sure that they are compensated in the right way.
Makes a lot of sense, honestly. I mean, especially since, like we talked about earlier, you guys are used to having a global team for certain things. I think it's one of those situations where if you maybe are used to everyone being in the same room, that transition could be a little bit dicey, or at least it would be more abrupt for a lot of people. But like you said, I mean, the same things happen in remote offices as happen in in-person offices. It's just there's a little bit more planning on the front end that goes into it, a little more like organization and saying like, okay, we're going to do this at this time, as opposed to things that happen organically, like water cooler chat or whatever.
Exactly.
And then just keep in mind that like that kind of, we always call them a debrief no matter what the situation is, but whatever just happened, then we say, okay, well, how could we have handled this differently, or how could we do this situation better? So making time for that, the planning to set yourself up for success, and then making sure that you touch on it and say like, okay, well, what didn't work in this scenario? What can we change? Does this need to be an all hands meeting? Does it need to just be, core group of, only the people that need to be here? Taking a look at those kinds of ideas and those kinds of like the logistical aspects of it is really important. And once it's in place, like we said, you keep checking back a little bit to kind of like make sure that everything's working for everybody. But once it's set up, it's a lot easier and it functions a lot more similarly to in-office practices than a lot of people really expect from the jump. So
yeah, the only advice I'd ever give to people, I probably would give a lot of advice, but one thing I would definitely say to everybody is like, you're your biggest advocate. Nobody is going to be a bigger advocate for yourself than yourself. So don't feel bad about doing that, like being your own PR for yourself. Like let people know the amazing things that you're doing. It doesn't make sure to do it in a decent way, but like don't ever feel bad about doing that. I always say over communication is the best thing.
And also now that we're at home and our personal life is a bit more merged with the professional during the day, one thing we really make sure we're doing is not holding that against anyone. So in terms of career paths, that doesn't negatively impact them in the slightest. We all have personal things to work through. So no, it's pretty much the same from that aspect of it.
That's a good call out. Thank you for that. We do have another question in the chat. Sal is asking, when you say waste, what does CNN consider to be waste? Bugs, inefficiencies, and who determines that? Sal says they're just curious.
So waste in general is any wasted time or wasted practices, right? So it actually varies by team, but I can give you an example. So say one team, for example, and we are a technology shop. So just keeping this, I'll try to keep it high level, but say one team that is handing off between when a developer finishes coding something over to the QA team for them to start their testing. If there's a delay there where that ticket is sitting for 2 or 3 days, that is considered wasted time because there's nothing happening with that effort. It's just sitting there and not making any movement. So as we go through the waste exercise, we identify that wasted time, talk through what we can do to resolve it, and then eliminate that. So as an example, that was an example where we had tickets just sitting there waiting to be picked up. And what we did was came up with a process where there's a 24-hour, and this is, like I said, this varies by team, but there's a 24-hour period. If it's sitting there longer than 24 hours, we need to raise the flag and make sure that it immediately gets addressed. So it's identifying wasted time, such as that we're looking for. And it varies because each team has a different scope and the way that they work may be different. So there's no one set way or one set thing that constitutes waste. It's just any time that's wasted.
Awesome, thank you. And Sal says thank you for that explanation. I think that's a really good thing to ask because the simple terms like that can kind of vary wildly in what they are, what the true meaning is from company to company, even department to department. But I think it's a good idea to take that broad view of that waste can be a lot of different things, and whether it's wasted time or wasted effort or wasted attention, it's all it's all something that hopefully we can kind of work towards keeping clean, so that there's less effort expounded on things that are not helping move you forward and move you towards your goals. All right, so for this next question, this person wanted to know, what are the success stories of translating video into tangible connections?
All right, I was on mute. I think so there's something that we're working on now, and I would say the success is in the steps that we're taking, which is a new thing, where if historically we work towards one common goal, but in doing that, it may take 6 months and then you ship it out to the user, it may fail, right? Like all of a sudden, you weren't in the meantime doing a bunch of user testing. So that's what we have been doing at CNN. We've changed over the past couple of years to start looking at what are the bite-sized chunks that we can push out to see if people are interested. And if they are, let's get that real-time feedback and then iterate and then go back through the discovery process and delivery and all of that. And so, something that really stands out to me right now about the success in that is we're doing this thing called digital channels. And so right now we have live channels. So we have the live CNN linear broadcast, HLN, and CNN International. But if we wanted to add new channels, that would cost a ton of money because we would have to do the same thing for broadcast, millions and millions of dollars. So what if we were able to create a channel digitally and input those either clips or programs or series into like a 24-hour period, just like a channel, and then push that out live. And so the first thing we did was really a POC of, is it possible for our programming team to get CNN content into this like playlist? I call it like a Spotify playlist. Yes, cool. Now what the team is doing is getting that playlist, aka a digital channel, onto CNN.com. When we would have created this whole backend system, and it would have taken many months to get out, and then we would have started then testing like what is the right programming that we should put on, and should we put on CNN.com, should we put on our owned and operated apps like the Roku app, or on an Android phone. And so this week we're putting it onto .com, and we're going to be able to in real time start seeing like what people are interested in and taking in that feedback. And that will help with the loop of what channels would they be interested in. Maybe they don't want anything to do with politics like myself, and they just want all travel all the time. Maybe they want something health related, whatever it may be. And so for me, like, those are the tangible connections with the user, seeing what they actually really want, rather than us making assumptions that they want something and then later finding out that wasn't so much, and then we've wasted X amount of like time and resources for that.
So when you guys are talking about this question was about the tangible connections.
Yeah.
Is there like specific, or are there, I should say, specific metrics that you are all looking for? Like,
Yeah.
Watching a video to completion or forwarding a video on, for example?
Yeah, definitely. I think like we have historically looked at how many video starts. What we are evolving into is starting to think through like the time spent and the actual engagement in that video. So it's not good enough that the video played, because if you go to CNN.com, it will autoplay, and like we've already done the work for you. What we want to find out is, are we making the right content? And so a success metrics for us would be, how long are they spending on that video? Are they watching another video after that? Have they gone through this like Netflix like binge where they just, I want to know everything about this specific subject?
That is really cool. And it's really interesting that you, because of the digital aspect, you're in a place where you can do more of that testing that is so crucial to kind of, development of a product, that like you can do that testing in a way that's not incurring the same amount of upfront costs or, work on the back end that's required, that would be required for something like an actual broadcast station. So
Yeah,
I think that's
we also don't have to worry about like dramatically changing anything all of a sudden. We have tools that can do A/B testing, so maybe only 5% of our audience will be able to see this, and then if that goes well, then we'll release it to like 20% and then 40% and so on.
very smart. Let's see, there was a question that was asked anonymously. They first said, thank you for the amazing presentation. Let's see, this person says, I want to use in function forwarding CNN, a dynamic routing of a capsule. Oh no, I'm sorry, I'm reading something that's not fully formed, I don't think. I'll come back to that question.
I was definitely thinking that is one for Jessica.
I was thinking, oh, we need our head of tech because something's happening here.
Yeah, I think it might be a more tech heavy question than I realized. So apologies for that. I'll take a look at the question and we'll revisit in a couple of minutes. Let's see here. We'll go to our next slide. This person had asked, how do you build the same team spirit and competition in remote teams during a pandemic? I feel like this is we've touched briefly a little bit about like your company culture, that kind of thing, but how do you address things like that sort of like esprit de corps, or like that healthy competition that you can get going between teams to help aid with production?
So we're actually working on something right now. Like we're trying to do hackathons and different innovation type activities in order to promote that competition. So it's actually still in the works right now. But even prior to that, within the teams, we have our demos where other team members are looking at things, and we'll have sessions where anyone can come and participate and chime in. And so if they'd like to take things and test them on their own innovation time, then they're more than willing. I mean, they're more than able to. So I think that is one way that we're doing that. In addition, we also have the usage now of the WebEx or Zoom like we're using right now. And as Jessica said before, just having that FaceTime, right, helps to keep the team spirit as opposed to the images. Because we're not in the office and we're not located in the same space, it is important to be able to see each other and interact and ask those questions. Because as you guys know, sometimes in the instant messaging platforms, you can take things out of context because they're just written. You don't know if that person meant it as a joke. You don't know exactly what their intent is. However, if you see them saying it, then it's a lot better to understand. So like I said, we have the innovation activities, we have our hackathon, and then having the face-to-face, all of that together helps to solidify the team spirit.
Thank you for sharing that. I think that's a really good way to approach it, especially since it can feel kind of after a while like you're sort of cheerleading for nothing. So it's kind of nice to think of it in terms of kind of the life cycle of the team or the life cycle of the project, instead of, no, we just got to keep everybody's spirits up. It's like, well, okay, but you can't maintain that forever. No one can. So let's look at it in terms of like, when do we need to build versus when is it okay to kind of either celebrate a win or take step back and at least take a breather. It's one of those things that it seems a lot more that it happens more organically in an in-office setting, but it's definitely just as important to pay attention to in a remote team. So, all right. So this person had asked, what are some common things you found that your teams are struggling with once they turned remote? And what is an unusual problem you've discovered just from working remotely?
I think like the unusual thing for me is like when I don't have time for myself anymore. So like all the time that I would spend like from going to my desk to a meeting room to another meeting room, like that walking time I miss very much. It just like I would use it to clear my mind, and then also like to speak to friends of mine that are like in the office. So that's, I think, something that I never thought about. But as far as the common thing that we're struggling with is the over communication. I think like I say to Kris, like in every meeting that we have, like communication is like so important, but I find like being remote, you need to over communicate, and you need to make sure that like you're not having these one-off conversations, that if you are, put it in Slack so everybody is informed, because it's very easy to like have a side Slack with somebody, but then not even realize like, oh my God, like I forgot, like the whole team should know this. And if I don't tell them this, then X, Y, Z. So I think like that's the one thing that I've seen really that we're struggling with. I don't know. What do you think, Kris?
I also think we're struggling with people knowing when to turn it off, right?
Oh yeah, that's me.
It's like we are, before when you had your commute time, you at least had that hour in the morning or hour in the evening, and then you would take a little break to what Jessica was saying and go walk around, or even having the casual conversation where you could go check in with someone. But now that we're all home, it's like you start early in the morning, you finish late in the evening. We're eating together because there's no other time for us to have a conversation. So we'll actually go cook and bring the laptop with us and just have the conversation in the meeting while we're cooking and while we're eating. So the struggle is turning it off and knowing when to turn it off and give yourself some personal time. So that's something that we're working on now in terms of evaluating our meetings, seeing what's critical versus what's not, and trying to slim those down a bit to give all of the team members more personal time.
I think those are two very important things to call out because, you know, the communication aspect is huge. And it's definitely something like we keep kind of circling around. It's something that happens more organically when you're in an office setting, but the idea of over communicating not only helps you, but it helps the rest of your team. Because you don't have those visual cues of like, oh yeah, so-and-so's over at her desk and I can just go chat with her about whatever. Personally, I've kind of reverted back to like what it was like when instant messenger was like new and still a thing. So like my Slack, like we use Slack as well, and my Slack status is almost never not updated. Like I kind of treat it like an odd like day in the life sort of thing of like, be right back running a quick errand. And then when I'm back, I'll be like, okay, I'm back and I'll, you know, I'm working until 4 or something. Then when I'm cooking dinner, I throw in something like I throw up a status like that. And it does kind of lead a little bit into what Kris had said about, you know, the workday sort of kind of never ending a little bit. But yeah, that over communication can help eliminate a lot of problems because you can try and short circuit a lot of these issues that might arise because you know, certain people aren't looped in on something. It's also one of the reasons I love Slack because we can be having a one-on-one conversation with somebody and be like, oh, we need to bring in, you know, so-and-so from that team on this conversation. And then I can either just grab the whole conversation and send it to them, or we can start a new channel, drag the conversation in and be like, here's what you missed to get you up to speed. It's kind of nice not having to actually repeat myself a lot. But you're right, like it kind of takes that extra thought in your head of like, who else needs to know this? Because they're not going to overhear it in the next cubicle, and you're not going to be like, you'd be able to pass somebody in the hallway and say, oh, hey, can you know, tell so-and-so what they missed in that meeting? So very important. And the breaks thing is huge too, because like I personally, I replicate a commute every morning. It's really silly. My husband thinks it's ridiculous, but I've been doing it since I moved remote. I come down in the mornings, I get my coffee, I take the dogs outside, I sometimes take one for a walk, then I come back. You know what I mean? Like you set up these things. It's like much more of a ritual than I ever had when I worked in an office. Because at that point I was just like trying to get out the door and make sure I was on time. But replicating that commute and giving yourself that space to, you know, kind of re-enter your workday is hugely important. I have a rule that when I close my office door for the evening, I don't go back into my office unless I'm like directly asked, like, hey, we have an emergency. I need you to, you know, change this on social or whatever. Once that door is closed, I don't go back in. It's hard. It's really hard. But it makes it a lot more, it helps me differentiate between like, yes, my office is in my house. Yes, I'm kind of always at work, but now is when I'm really taking time for myself. This is the evening. If I were working in an office, I would not be expected to be on my computer now. So, right. You know, yeah.
Turn it off. That's right.
All right, so this person had asked, have people needed more support during this pandemic with their project manager training?
Not at all. And I was trying to think of a way to say this without sounding too cocky, but our delivery team is just that awesome that they continue to perform well, pandemic or not. We actually have centers of practice that they participate in where they share best practices amongst each other. As a whole, we get together as a delivery team and talk through issues, and we talked about having lessons learned sessions and different things. So we have a pretty tight project management community, and we support each other on an ongoing basis. So we haven't seen much need for additional training there. We just all make the effort to participate in those centers of practice. Hint, hint, Aletha, you can add me, and the other team members. So we do a great job though at keeping each other up and sharing the latest trends that come out and all of that. No, we stay on top of it pretty well.
All right, moving on to our next question. This person asked, have you had to change the way in which you target and deliver your video products, e.g. targeting more specific or general platforms?
Not as of yet. I think though, with what I alluded to before about that whole intentional viewing, I think we will start making decisions perhaps to target I don't know if anybody here has a Roku, but they're great. You do, Daddy? Okay, awesome. So we are taking away the autoplay effect for that experience. And we're asking them specifically, like, what is it that you want? Do you want live video or do you want featured video? Our hypothesis, at least over there, is that they want live video because they're unaware of all the great catalog that we actually have, because we would throw people into clips. So you'll start seeing us do, like, we'll throw around the word experiment all the time, because now we're just really trying to figure out, like, who are our users, and what do they want, and how can we better, like, zoom in on those specific people, and carrying them throughout the funnel. So if you have discovered CNN through a Google search, how then can we get you from that website into downloading our app and experiencing solely like a CNN experience in our apps? I think that's truly like the goal for us, of getting you to become like this super user. So if you are interested in news and have an affinity to CNN, how can we get you to consume that news solely on CNN? We are seeing this interesting trend where people are doing their own fact checking. And so if, even though, like, I enjoy CNN, I also want to check out the New York Times, Huffington Post, whatever it may be. I'll go visit those other sites to see if everybody kind of has the same story. And even like competitors like Fox News, like, people will check there, like, what's being said there. And so looking at that, we're introducing new products like Facts First. Like, even if you have an affinity to CNN, but you have this other behavior where you're checking facts, how can we start bringing in that information to show you, like, here's what other people are saying as well? I went on a tangent, but
No, it's interesting.
It felt right. It felt right.
No, it's really interesting, because what you talk about with, like, fact checking, I recognize that as something I do, and I don't even think of it as fact checking necessarily. I think of it more as, like, from a consumer perspective, I assume anybody that's telling me anything has some kind of not necessarily like a bias or a slant to what they're reporting, but, like, there's going to be some things left out, because you can't tell the entirety of a story, especially in short videos. So for me, it's more of a, like, trying to get a good idea of the full picture, and not only see what news sources that I really trust are reporting, but also news sources that I am more skeptical of, or maybe people that I don't generally agree with. And so I try and take a look and see, well, what angle is this, this company or this, this news source pushing, and how does that relate? And does it feel like the focus is more accurate or more appropriate, or is it something where, no, the focus is skewed and here's why? So that's a really good way to look at it. I hadn't thought of it in terms of fact checking, but I think that's a really good way to phrase it.
You're one of the many people that we found that are doing that.
Well, you can't just listen to people that agree with you, right? Otherwise you're in an echo chamber. And even if all it does is tell you, like, no, I super don't agree with that person, it helps you kind of, at least for me, it helps me, like, kind of reinvestigate what I'm believing, not just reaffirming, no, I don't agree with them. It's like, okay, but why don't I agree with them here? Is it for valid reasons, or is it for personal, petty reasons or whatever? Okay, so we had another question that was asked anonymously in the chat. This person asked, how are digital product decisions affected by the challenge to be the first to release a story and also receive consumer feedback?
I don't think we're really, like, on the product side, we're not really affected by wanting to be the first to release a specific story. I would say in our business model, we are known for being like the home of breaking news. So in that, yes, like, we would want to get out stories first before anybody else, rather than a specific story. And so I think like that being first does very much weigh on us. But I think like as we are like discovering like who we are, how people consume news now versus 10 years ago, it's very different. And then how are people going to consume news even after the pandemic? Like who knows? Like things are so different now. So I think like it has a weight, but not as much weight as it used to have, if that makes any sense. But as far as like product decisions, like hey, we're user focused. That is the number one thing. So we're not going to push out anything, even if it makes us $1 bajillion, because that's what we're doing for like the business. We want to do it for the user. We want to make sure that there's a base that's asking for that specific feature or whatever it may be product. We do a lot of user research. We have a bunch of teams that are their sole focus is that. So there's a consumer insights team, there's an audience development team, there's the research team, and I'm sure I'm forgetting a bunch of other teams, but even like our product teams, so we have cross-functional teams. That is the main part of what they're doing in discovery, is figuring out like what problems are there and how can we solve them.
All right. So moving along to, I think this might be our last question here. What do you mean by redefining video at CNN? And how have you been attempting to accomplish this? And we talked about this briefly earlier. Their sub-question says, has obtaining video content become more difficult due to quarantine measures and people unable to leave their homes, or maintaining professionalism in the workplace when working from home?
Yeah, I think for this one, it's not that we're having difficulty obtaining content. In fact, we're being pretty scrappy about it. There are, some on our digital productions teams that have created like master control rooms in their basements or like office, and we are able to do things now with like one camera, whereas before we would have to want to do this whole giant production, and we're learning like we don't have to be like that. I think like what we mean by redefining video at CNN, it's the whole, again, like intentional viewing. You'll hear me say it 1,000 times. Like we want to make sure that we're creating a video that you will intentionally want to watch. And in that, there's a lot of caveats. And the first one is, find out who your users are and what they want.
Also, now that we have more cord cutters, such as myself, we're working to make sure that experience, regardless of the platform that they're using, is just as awesome as it is when they go to the website. So looking forward and looking ahead as things evolve technically on that front is also our focus as well.
And when you're specifying that the cord cutters, you're talking about like a digital user versus a mobile user?
Right, like those using, like I largely use the Fire Sticks, for example, right, as opposed to paying for Comcast cable or things like that. So those that want to control their digital experience as opposed to being forced to watch whatever's on TV or forced to the limitations of on demand.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I never would have thought about that angle. That's really interesting. All right. Okay, so we do have 5 minutes left. So if anybody else has any other questions they would like to ask, please feel free to come off mute and ask. You can also put your question into the Zoom chat if you'd like. While we are waiting to see if anybody else has any last minute questions they'd like to ask, I do just want to call out again real quickly that CNN is hiring. So would either of you like to speak to the questions on the screen, what positions you're looking for, your favorite part about working at CNN, or anything like that?
Yeah, so what positions are we hiring for? So we're looking for, really just kick-ass product managers. So if you are somebody who is curious about how things work and how to make them better, like product is in your blood, and so we're looking for you at every level. What's the favorite part about working at CNN? I think like, I'm never bored. I've never lasted anywhere more than 3 years because like there's a point for me that I'm just like, okay, like I've done this, there's nothing else for me to learn. What I love about CNN is it literally changes all the time, and not in a annoying way, in a way that you're a part of it and you're helping drive that narrative. So that's my favorite part about working at CNN. And any tips for somebody who's interested in flying, reach out to Kris and I. As much as your resume may be amazing, like if you apply, it's very hard for us to actually see it. So, talk to us on LinkedIn, send it over. Don't be scared, like take the initiative.
We also have tech openings as well in terms of engineers and architects. I think we have a lot of app specific needs as well. So pretty much, we're pretty much hiring in every area. So feel free to apply or reach out, as she said. As far as my favorite part about working with CNN, I would say it's the collaboration. So we're big on team-driven decisions as opposed to top-down decisions. We really work to empower our teams. So even from a project management standpoint, our teams determine which agile framework they're using. They work together on the tests. We really work to empower our teams. So I think that, I would say, is my favorite part about working for CNN. And in terms of tips, my tips for anyone that's looking, make sure you're prioritizing your needs first. Like, what are you looking for in that next career? And then bring that when you have the conversation so that we can make sure it's a mutual fit, not just about what we're looking for, but what you're looking for as well, because that will lead to longevity with the job, which is the goal. We hope to keep you around for years and years to come.
Yes, absolutely. That retention is key. All right, so in our last 2 minutes here, I just want to say a huge thank you to both Jessica and Kris for taking time out of your day to spend with us in our community and answer our questions. Is there anything that either or both of you would like to leave us with before we sign off for the day?
I would say, like, piggybacking on what Kris was saying about the tips, like just be open to opportunities, because I didn't study anything close to product. It just kind of like fell into my lap, and it kept falling into my lap. So be open, say yes if that's something that interests you.
Yeah, and to that, also, if you see, if you fit outside of the positions that we have posted, meaning it's not something listed, but you want to craft your own career, like say you're a bridge between a product manager. You want us to know while I get us going live here on YouTube. Right. I like to talk to myself as I walk through this live thing. So I'm pressing play. We're live on YouTube. Awesome. Now I'm going to come back to Zoom and share my screen. Just let me know when you all can see my screen. Can you see my screen, Jade?
I can see it.
Awesome. Great. Let me get my chat box going. All right. So I see you all representing. I will give you some shout outs when we go live in just a second here. I really appreciate everyone for taking the time out of their busy schedules to join us today. So we'll get started in just about 2 more minutes. So we're just chatting offline. If you want to, let us know anything about yourselves. Let's see, calling from the Bay Area. Michelle's calling from the Bay Area. Great. What's up, Michelle? We got Nicole calling from Buenos Aires. I'm in Argentina, in Buenos Aires as well. Jade is in Houston, Texas. So if you're joining us, just let us know where you're calling from and any background information that you want us to know as well. I'm super excited to jump into your chat today, Jade.
Yeah, I am. I can't wait. We have an hour. I feel like we're probably going to need like 3, but it sounds like we have about an hour, right?
We have an hour, but please come back whenever you want. I already know that you are going to light this up on fire, and I'm excited to learn with you today. So the hour usually goes by quickly as well.
Yes. I bet it's going to be done with so quickly, but I'm excited.
And I'll let you know, Jade, just so you know, I'll let you know when we have about 10 minutes left, so that if there isn't something that we didn't get to and you want to highlight that, you can have the time to do that.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right, so just in about 1 more minute, we'll give any latecomers a chance to join, or if other folks are having some tech issues.
feel free to turn your cameras on if you feel called to do so. I know we're in quarantine mode, so don't be ashamed if you haven't showered today. If you got the kids running around, just put your virtual background on. I see you got your virtual background on, Nicole. Awesome. All right. Vivian calling from Atlanta, represent. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and go live here on the cloud so we can jump right in. Are you ready, Jade?
I'm ready to go.
All right, let's do this. All right, so we are live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Chat and Learn here with PowerToFly. I'm super excited for today's hour. My name is Mariella, and I don't want to waste any time talking about myself or anything that's going on in the world. We all know the crazy things that are going on in the world, and really what I want to do today for this hour is to take our time, have our guest speaker acknowledge and respond to a lot of your questions that you've submitted offline, and really get us into being in the present moment. So with that said, I just want to go over some housekeeping rules. I've muted everyone upon entrance just to avoid any background noise, but feel free. I cannot stress enough. We want to hear from you. Turn your cameras on. We believe in visibility. Take yourself off of mute whenever you have something to say. If you see your question appear on the screen and you want to dive in deeper, feel free to do so. If this wasn't your question and it brings up a dream that you had last night, or you really want to dig in deeper, feel free to write in the chat box or to take yourselves off of mute. If you have something sensitive that you'd like to bring up, feel free to message me privately, and I will flag that to our guest speaker so that we keep your suggestion anonymous. And then the last thing that I'll say is that this is being recorded. So I know we live in multitask central world these days, but I would really, really value your presence. And if you can participate, that would be great. I'm gonna sound like a broken record by the end of this chat, just to invite you off of mute and to drop in the chat box. And you have submitted some beautiful questions offline. We're gonna get to that in just a minute, but I really want to dive into meeting Jade. I got a chance to speak with her offline, and I'm super excited to hear more about her experience, her journey, and to hear her response to these beautiful questions that you all have submitted offline. So Jade, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? How did you come to know about PowerToFly, and what are you excited to share with us today?
Man, that's already a loaded question. In a nutshell these days, I feel like we're all sort of reinventing on the spot. So we're going to have to write new resumes in the next couple of weeks or so, because we've learned so much about ourselves in a really powerful way. I think the easiest way to describe my life and how I got to where I am right now is it's marked by chronic reinvention. You see the picture here with me sitting on the piano. That was the childhood dream, was simply to be a classical concert pianist. And I'm one of the lucky ones, right, who has gotten to live that out. I have had a successful career. I'm still a Yamaha artist and still have the pleasure of being able to perform in incredible spaces. But, we had a couple of detours, and you'll hear me talk about detours later. And I think one of the most powerful ones was doing something that came very naturally to me in a setting that it wasn't very natural for, which is basically I started speaking in the middle of a classical music concert. And that radically changed the course of everything. People literally started booking me. They would say, get that piano girl who talks, right? So it was like suddenly speaking made me this hot commodity. Speaking itself took on a career of its own. And then eventually I decided I didn't want to have to choose. I saw one of your questions about being multiphasic and how do we kind of deal with that. And so I really made a life out of not choosing, refusing to choose, and understanding how do each of these facets, the musician in me, the minister in me, the comedian in me, the speaker in me, how can I bring them all together for one big experience? And that experiment ended up being my calling card. And so today I'm honored to be a sought after keynote speaker. And I have the pleasure of traveling the world and speaking to some of the world's most superlative companies, most incredible brands. And they bring me in mostly to talk on creativity, transformation, leadership, and reinvention. And so you guys had me at the title, like PowerToFly. It's like, I don't care what it is, sign me up, just tell them yes, let's do it. I don't need to know anything else. And so I'm always looking for places to have courageous conversations. And if this is not the era for conversations that prick a little bit, but on the other side lead to incredible breakthrough, I don't know what else is. So as we started campaigning, if you didn't know, I'm running as an independent candidate for president of the United States. people keep going like the PTA, is it like they like literally 2 months in, we had to figure out like on the website, are we not saying president big enough? We have changed the font size of the word president so many times, it's not even funny. And we'll get to that in here. But today I'm coming to you as an independent candidate for president. And it seems wild and random to so many, but if we were to track my path, it's one of those things that you go, it makes perfect sense. And so I'll explain all of that later, but I am running as a candidate for president of the US. And the real theme here is impact. The real theme here is when you see a void, you're mandated to step into it. That's just how I've always lived my life. And so that's how we've gotten to this point right here. But I'm really seated right next to my piano. The piano is still my baby. It is the thing that has always opened doors and got me in rooms. And then I get to choose what kind of music I want to make. So I'll end there for introductions, and I'm sure we'll break a lot of that down as we go on.
Wow, what a beautiful introduction. And I'm so honored to host this chat today. Like I said, I'm excited to learn more about you. I had an opportunity to learn about you offline, and I was not, I could see that you were running to, to be the next president of the United States. So that was not confusing for me. I hope that everyone can, honor that as well.
That's because we already changed the font, Mariella. But by the time you
okay.
start, we have the big font. So you got it right on point.
Perfect. So how beautiful your journey so far. I love that you also have the, it looks like your piano is like coming alive behind you with the black and white. So you clearly know how to have your vision surround you. And I honor that. I see that in you. So great. You all have submitted some great questions offline. We are going to take this one by one. I see that some of you have already written in the chat box. If you're just joining us, I'm going to sound like a broken record by the end of this chat, but I really, really want you all to participate. This is not meant to be something where someone is speaking at you. We want to hear your voice. Your voice is important. So like I said, I've muted everyone upon entrance, but at any point, feel free to take yourselves off of mute and feel free to use the chat box. You are taking this hour out of your day, so participate, please. If you haven't already, drop in the chat box where you're calling from. So Jade is calling from Houston. I'm in Buenos Aires. I see that some of you all have written as well. Buenos Aires, Argentina, Atlanta. Awesome. We've got, where else here? Drop in the chat where you're calling from. Another Houston, Texas. Perfect. New York, London. Awesome. Great. So Buenos Aires again, Florida, Ohio. Thank you all for writing in the chat. I really appreciate that. So let's keep this up. All right. So let's move on to the first question here. And again, I can't stress enough, we want to hear from you. If this was your question, feel free to add more in the chat box or take yourselves off of mute. This is going to be a great hour. So thank you all in advance for participating. All right, so Jade, let's go for this first question.
Yeah.
How did the skills you developed as a concert pianist help influence and develop you into the transformational speaker and business leader you are today?
The obvious answer to that is, as a classical musician, you literally spend hours every day perfecting one piece of music, sometimes one page. So on average, when I was in college, I was practicing anywhere from 8 to 10 hours. An easy day, a light day, was 5 to 7 hours a day. And the type of detail, and I started playing very late in the world of classical music. I didn't start till I was 8 years old, which is like over the hill. When you're talking about Mozart, Beethoven, and Chopin. So I had a lot of catching up to do. The advantage I had was the emotional sensitivity to the music. So before I ever went to school and learned how you were supposed to play Russian music or Rachmaninoff or the difference between Mozart and Beethoven, I instinctively understood it. So where I excelled was I had an old soul where classical music was concerned, and emotionally I related. So even as a young girl, I'd play concerts and there were adults who would say, I'm feeling something I haven't felt before, or I have goosebumps. And I remember being young and not really understanding what that was. At the same time, I remember some of the criticism that came my way when I was doing competitions was, she's too into the music. She's too expressive. I moved way too much, like Prokofiev, like got my head going, like, that it was classical music, but I felt it. I felt it so tangibly. And that is what later distinguished me in my career, is that there were audiences who said, I used to think classical music was boring, or I used to think it was stuffy, but now I feel it differently. And so I think in terms of translating to leadership, that same sort of awareness of the audience and what the audience needs. So, if you're really lucky, you want to never play a piece of music the same way 2 times in a row. And the way that you vary the music is you're responding to what the audience is requiring of you. So if you feel like, just like in speaking, right? If you feel like your audience is losing, you change course, you tell a joke, you do something. And so the same thing in music. It's like, oh, I'm not supposed to speed up here, but I think I will because the audience needs it. And so I would always respond to that. Now in leadership, and especially as a speaker, I'm in rooms where I'm coming into a lot of preconceived notions, right? Especially as a Black female speaker, a Black female concert pianist. And I love playing with those expectations. So I love doing exactly the opposite of what people are expecting me to do. And I think also in leadership, you need that. I also think that my career changed when I stopped obsessing over how perfectly I could play, how many notes I missed, and how many memory slips I had. And I started focusing on what journey does the audience need to be taken on that they don't even know yet. Changed everything. So even in leadership now, I'm teaching other leaders to not just be concerned about your legacy, but can you lead down through to the legacy of the people that you serve? That creates a sort of loyalty that cannot be created simply from being a great disciplinarian or a great strategic thinker. It's when people really believe you care about their outcomes beyond the bottom line, beyond the profit. It marries them to you in a much different way, and the results you're able to yield are different. And when you don't meet the goal, the atmosphere that you're able to have and maintain is much different than if the only focus was on the bottom line. So that kind of back and forth and understanding the audience, the customization for an audience also translates into how I lead and into how I lead my team in my company and how I lead audiences as well.
How beautiful. We chatted a little offline about a topic that I love to speak about, which is emotional intelligence. And of course, if you're an artist, you got to bring emotional intelligence, in my opinion, first, so that you can connect with whatever it is that you're trying to present. So I love that you honor that in the work that you do, and you bring that into your leadership roles as well. I got some people writing in the chat here that you're super inspiring. I'm loving what you're saying. It's so true. Awesome. So keep it going, y'all. Let's keep this chat live. I see that a lot of you have just joined as well. So if you're just joining us, please feel free to take yourself off of mute at any time. I'm going to sound like a broken record. There's no shame. I want to hear everything that Jade has to say, but as she says, it's important to bring the audience in. And if you're calling here live, we want to hear your voice. So with that said, let's move on to the next question. And if this is your question, feel free to share your voice. So what is your process when you choose to reinvent yourself? For example, do you dive deep into researching the role and learning the skills required for the role, or do you jump into opportunities to learn the skills on the job? This is a great question.
Wow. Okay. Listen. So I am a leap before you look person. I'm a deep diver. I've gained the confidence over the years to know that even when I leap unexpectedly, I usually land on my feet. So because of that, I leap even quicker now, right? So now I've shrunk the time between the thought and the decision making. I'm able to leap a lot quicker. So my process for reinvention first is usually I'm getting better at listening to what's happening around me. So the decision to run for office, for years now, my family and I had been talking about it for years, 2 or 3 years. And we honestly thought it was going to be something that happened much farther down the road. But this is where I'm talking about that decision making shrinking. What I've been teaching people and what I've been perfecting myself is to pay attention to what really is going on around you. Because a lot of times your plans do not sync up with the reality of what's happening. Your plans are on point in sense of the content, but the timeline is almost always off. And that's because our timeline we usually make based on our comfort level. So if you're a master planner like me, you could plan this out. Well, I'll be senator for 2 years and I'll do just what Obama did. And then I'll do this. And if I can turn Texas purple and and I can plan it out. The plan was beautiful. But I'm running as an independent for a reason. And the independent does not fit into the plan. And what we realized was there were 2 things that I felt were coming. I felt like we were coming into a season where we were going to be at an all-time low where race relations was concerned. I thought it was going to simply be sparked by the current political climate. I had no idea George Floyd was going to happen. I also sensed that we were coming into a season where the economic disparities and disparities in our education system and disparities because of systemic injustices would come to a head and be exacerbated. I had no idea COVID-19 was going to do what it did. But I made the decision to officially run on January 1st. COVID-19 kind of officially hit end of February, right after I made my announcement. George Floyd happened only recently at the end of May. And those served as validation for what we were sensing. I sensed that those two things, the exacerbation in the disparities and the race relations issue, were the reason I needed to submit my voice into the void at this time. And so now that we see this happening, it feels like validation, because as we look at some of our other options, many people are saying they can't imagine those options shepherding us through this moment. And so I know we're going to talk about qualifications later, because on the surface, you would think, well, you're not a politician. Why are you doing this? But the reinvention requires us to actually put away the resume and to look at what the resume of life has been. When you've stepped into the void, what has been the space that you've been filling and what has been the outcome? And when you see a certain track record there, to me, you owe it to the world now to step into the next void, even if it's much bigger and much scarier. So reinvention to me is dictated by what is society asking of us? Society is very different from people. We'll get to that later. What is society asking of us? And then what qualifications do you have? And then make the leap without checking to see if you have all the equipment. Just make the leap and trust that the talents and the skills are there, and you'll be able to collect the weaponry as you go on.
I love that. I love that you're highlighting, I mean, the way that I'm interpreting this has a lot to do with intuition as well, which I feel like
Oh yeah,
we have just over time, I mean, generational, accumulation of just numbing our intuition, and that also keeping people afraid from making leaps of faith that could, have this really beautiful outcome in the end.
Yeah.
So I'm happy that you are, one of few who are still listening and in touch with your intuition to be able to take these leaps of faith and to, kind of sense the climate of change and be courageous enough to share your voice in those moments. So,
well, and you have to back that up. Let me say, as we talked a little bit off, line as people were coming on about being a rule follower. Listen, you've still got to be prepared, right? And you've still got to execute in excellence. And so those were skills that also came from my years as a concert pianist. So when I say take that leap, it's not that we're recommending you leap without there being thought to how, once you're in the midst of that free fall, you're going to be ready for the landing. So that's backed now. That leap has been backed by, you can imagine the amount of content I'm consuming right now. I have 50 different people who brief me on every issue imaginable, but I'm combining everything they bring to the table with intuition. I am a person of faith, so I spend a lot of time in prayer. I'm also a person of observation, but preparation for me is key. And so now I get to use the skills that I've honed as a communicator to apply it to this job that I'm applying for. So there is that balance, right? You don't get to just leap and go, whatever happens, right? That's one kind of theory. For me, you leap and you go, now what do I have to do? Where do I dig in? How do I deep dive? And so, but for me, the consumption of the content and the process of getting ready is very exhilarating for me. So I love that. And again, I think that comes from the hours of practice. For that one concert that's going to be over like that, but you put in 50, 60 hours just to learn that one piece, So I'm excited by the preparation too, but I think you have to leap and then trust that you'll know how to prepare.
Yes, I love that. Thank you for clarifying that. And I specifically said that so that people would be able to know that you got to back it up with some fire, and you can't just do things at the drop of a dime without being prepared. Especially as we see the climate of the world is ready to throw lots of different things our way. So I'm happy that you are prepared for this.
And but can you go back to that slide, because that picture? Oh my gosh! So what you can't see now with my very sensible hair, this is sensible hair for me. Usually I match my reinventions with a new hair style. And my hair honestly changes about every 2 weeks. I have an incredible stylist. And so we get a new random style for every engagement. So you might see me in 1 week with very different styles. If you were to scour my personal Facebook or my business Facebook, you will see them. And my last hair was very similar to this picture with the shaved sides. And so we grew that back a little bit because we knew already what I was doing was radical enough. People aren't quite ready for the purple and the, and the shaved side. So the hardest part about this run has been keeping the same hairstyle. And I haven't kept it all the way. My hair was like this long a couple days ago, and now it's not. The magic of that's black girl magic there for those of you who are watching it. But so that has been the hardest part of doing this, is because you will, to some degree, have to conform in a way that allows people to digest what it is you're bringing to the table. And so that things that are you normally may have to be, and I say this very carefully because I really believe in not dimming your shine at all and really bringing all of yourself to the table. But we also have to be mindful of distraction. And so for me, as I see this picture, I do mourn a bit, you know, my shaved sides and my color and everything. But I love that she was on that screen. I had to say that.
Yes. Someone here has written in the comment, oh my gosh, please, we absolutely need a purple haired president. So you have people who
after the election, that's what we do. We get in there first, right? Then the mohawks come back in the hair. And they're going to say, what just happened?
Yes. I love that. I love that you're also highlighting, you know, don't dim your light, but there is a certain balance. I'm a fan of balance as well. I hear that in a lot of what you're saying. Don't go extreme. You're going to push people away. Don't try, you know, to polarize. We've already gotten into this mess for being so polarized. And how can we walk that middle line of finding balance, but also in a very, you know, a brilliant way where we can still shine our light. So
That's right.
Awesome. Great. All right, let's move on to this next question. Does anyone have anything they want to say? I know I'm taking up a lot of talk time. I'm just really enamored with our guest speaker and all the things that she's saying. So I'll hold for a light pause to see if anyone wants to take themselves off of mute or drop in the chat box.
Do you have any advice for kind of walking that line between not necessarily dimming your light, but like you'd said, there's certain things that people are ready for and certain things that they aren't? Is there a way to kind of thread that needle where you're being true to yourself and how, you know, being your most authentic self, but also not, you know, shooting yourself in the foot by creating a situation where you are having to, you know, maybe push more uphill than you would have if you were to, you know, like you said, like switch back from purple hair. Is there anything kind of, you know, rules to remember while you're doing that so that you're not going too much one way or the other?
At the end of the day, you've still got to feel absolutely like yourself. So if any of what we're calling balance makes you feel smaller or boxed in, then that's too much to the other way. So I still feel like myself, you know, and a couple of days ago, I had a little more highlights in here and the hair was longer. And I keep at least one side short because I'm really a short-haired girl at heart. So as long as I have this, you know, if you see me doing this, it's like me remembering who I am, right? And so I keep that in there. That's our secret signal now. So if you ever see me on the news that I'm doing this, right? I think the balance is you've still got to feel that that your output still has all of you in it. So the thing I always say is make sure that you're bringing all of yourself to every single table, every single time. If you are having to completely shape shift in different settings, to me, something's wrong with that. We adjust, right? There's a certain way that I talk in Black culture. We talk about code switching a lot, right? So when I go home to Charleston, South Carolina, it's an island influenced area. We speak Geechee. But if I got on stage in the corporate setting and started speaking Geechee, you would not even be able to understand me, let alone relate and learn from me. So that's an easy one to pick. But I also make sure that there are certain themes and qualities and characteristics that I take with me everywhere. So if I'm wearing a suit, which I had to go buy a lot of because I just don't wear your typical corporate suit, I'm still making sure that my voice is never dimmed, right? So my voice always shows up the same way. The accent might be a little different, but what I'm saying is always the same. The way that I treat people always shows up the same way. And then the way that I present physically in terms of style will always be slightly out of the box from what people are expecting. So even if I'm in a standard suit, you better believe the shoes are going to be saying something. Do you hear what I'm saying? The jewelry, I'm never going to show up to a space, and you should never show up to a space where people don't recognize you. They should still recognize you. And you're not defined by, of course, the clothes and the hair. And I think in terms of distraction, if you know that what you're presenting is already radical enough, then you can tone down the other things, the outward appearance, but make sure that the voice is always at fever pitch. I hope that helps.
Thank you.
And I have, sorry, Mariella, I have a quick question as well. And also, oh my gosh, you're like my spirit animal listening to you speak. You just say so many things that resonate with me, and that, oh my gosh, it's just really awesome to get to listen to you. And I'm wondering how this approach that you are so unapologetically and so authentically yourself, it's not always easy to come by, especially in politics. And so how do you feel that has impacted the way you've either presented yourself while still maintaining all of that authenticity and, for lack of a better word, competing with everyone in this arena?
Yeah. It has been the consistent, successful point of action. So we knew, first of all, running as an independent was a very intentional choice. I have been courted before by people from both parties, both major parties. I don't hear my voice in either party strongly. And I had a suspicion that other people felt politically homeless, like I did. So we knew the last thing I needed to do was look like anybody else that had run before me. We knew that was why do it. Right. So we knew we had the luxury. In some ways, we have nothing to lose. Right. We already were starting out with no political support. We were starting out with no key political advisors. And you can't believe the stuff that happens behind the scenes versus what's actually happening and what you're seeing in front. So we knew that the risk would have been in trying to look like those other guys, more so than in just being myself. And so what's been powerful is that what people are saying is, wait a minute, you don't sound like a politician. Like even the reporters, and we'll get done with these interviews, and it's baffling people in a good way. So what's wonderful is people who've been looking for something that is not politics as usual are gravitating. If they can find me, right? If we can bust out, we'll talk about that later. But once they find me, they go, oh my gosh, you're my spirit animal. This is exactly how I feel. And I don't know what your political affiliation is. And to me, that is proof that we are bigger than these political boxes we've been stuffing ourselves in, that this is just about humans trying to serve other humans. And if we keep it at that, we mostly don't agree on how to serve each other. We disagree on issues. And it's funny because those issues we disagree on are rarely actually the things that are affecting our everyday life, but they are the things that make for great political argument. And so we've been, I feel, forced into fear-based kind of decision-making. And so people seeing me be fearless also frees them in determining how they're going to vote this year. And that's been the most humbling thing, is to hear people say, I was literally going to opt out this year. I was done. I was not even going to vote, and now I am. Or others who said, I've never been registered, and now I'm going to register to vote. And to be able to receive them without condemnation, without making them feel stupid or irresponsible because they hadn't voted before now, but saying, wow, you're seeing hope, you're seeing a solution, and it creates something in you that wants to take action. So we think that that authenticity has been key and will be even more crucial the closer we get to November.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing, Nicole. I appreciate that. Yeah, get us out of the circus. The circus these days, it's, it lacks authenticity and it's all showy. And so I think that's probably why a lot of people are receiving, what you're sharing, is because, there's been a lack of that for too much time, actually. So. Okay, let's move on to this next question. So we've got about half an hour left. You see, time goes by quickly. So let's run through these next couple of questions. And with that said, if anyone is on the line and wants to get their question, now, please drop in a chat box or take yourselves off of mute. We want to hear from you. Okay, so what are the top 3 mindset shifts people need to have in order to successfully reinvent themselves?
Okay, so one of the biggest things that I think people honestly live and die, unfortunately, with ever feeling like they discovered their purpose. And I think that's because we always attach purpose to something, position, job, title. So I always say this everywhere I go, your purpose is not the thing you do. It is the thing that happens in others when you do what you do. That one thing right there, let me say it again, because you need it. Your purpose is not the thing you do. It is the thing that happens in others when you do what you do. When I got that, that is what unlocked me from the piano, because I always thought I was cheating on the piano, right? If I did anything else, because I trained my whole life to play this beast. Should I really be speaking? Can I really be a minister? Why the heck am I writing a book? I'm a pianist. But when I realized, oh, it's not to play the piano. It's what's happening in the audience when I play, when I speak, when I write, when I joke, right? When I minister. And so that allowed me, the stereotypical American, over-involved American kid, right? I played 3 sports, 7 different instruments. I was in the band. I was that kid. And I've been told my whole life, you have to pick. And I just felt like, no, I don't want to pick. I can't pick. Now I understand you pick based on purpose. So if I can write and still activate people into becoming their biggest, boldest self, I have permission to write. If I can minister and activate people in that way, I get permission. If I can activate a nation into becoming its biggest, boldest self, rediscovering its truest identity, which is to serve and leave a legacy of service behind, I get to run for president too. So that thing is, you get that purpose statement down, and the way to find it is you go back and interview some of your friends and say, what happens when I'm around? What happens when I speak? And be prepared. It might not always be good, right? But you're listening for the good stuff, and you want to find out what that chronic effect is. The effect is your purpose. So some of you are amazing listeners, and when people are listened to by you, they feel this or they have this outcome. That's one of the number one things you can do, is find out what that effect is. And then you look for places to have that effect. The second thing, detours are not detours. They are divine interventions. I look at all the things that I lost. I was first runner-up at Miss America. People go, that's amazing. No, it's not. It's awful. You're the last person standing, and when they do that drum roll thing, you're the lady who gets the hook while the other girl gets crowned. It's awful. But it's incredible, because for me that year, the lady who won, who I love, Heather French Henry, won Miss America. My platform was youth suicide prevention. A couple months before the Miss America pageant at the time, the Columbine massacre happened years ago. That was like one of the first major school shootings. Suddenly, youth violence, suicide prevention, mental health awareness were the hot button issues. Even though I wasn't Miss America, I traveled and spoke more than Miss America, got to testify in front of Congress. Had I won Miss America actually had some internal scandal issues. She was not able to speak for the first 4 to 6 months of being Miss America. Had I won, I would have been silenced and siloed. By losing, an entire other world opened up to me, where I became an advocate in mental health awareness. You'll see me releasing platforms and policies about those issues. It wasn't a detour. It was a divine intervention. I didn't get into Juilliard. Still pissed about that. But if I'd gotten into Juilliard, I would have been practicing for 16 hours a day. And there was no way you would have convinced me that as a Juilliard grad, I was supposed to be doing anything other than playing Mozart, Beethoven, and Chopin all day long. That's all I would have accepted. But because I went to other schools that fostered that well-roundedness, here I am in front of you today. So your detours are actually divine interventions. Lastly, do not ask permission to disrupt. Man will never give you permission to disrupt his paradigms. And I don't mean that in a gender sense. I mean man as in human. Humans are never going to say, please come here, challenge our status quo. Hi, we're looking for change. They will never do that. So I encourage you that if you feel in your soul it is time to disrupt a thing, to dismantle a system, I dare you to dive in. The permission will never come in the front. But after you dive in, there will be people who will say, thank God you are doing this. We are so grateful you are here. We've been praying for someone like you to arise. This is what we're hearing on the road. Had I asked, someone said, a reporter said, did you do a what do you call the committee you send out when you're exploratory committee. He said, did you do an exploratory committee to run for president? And I said, no. And he said, why? I said, because everybody would have told me no and not to do it. So I didn't explore other people's fears. Come on, give me an amen on that one. I didn't explore other people's fears. Instead, we explored what was happening around us and said, would this moment benefit from us adding to the texture? And if so, then we felt like we had to say yes. So don't ask permission to disrupt. Discover that your purpose is really the effect you have on others. And remember that your detours are actually divine interventions.
Yes, I'm on mute right now, but I'm like doing some like hallelujah over here, and I think folks are writing in the chat box. Ali has written, I love how you've managed to see the other side of why things weren't meant to work out the way you wanted them to. Yes, I agree. What did you want to comment on? Maybe some people are in those situations right now, especially with COVID, and things aren't working out. Can you just kind of talk more about this divine intervention moment?
Yeah, that divine intervention now becomes something me and my team look for. It sounds so backwards. We get excited about rejection. So we say rejection is really divine protection, protecting you from the devastation of the wrong yes. And I think women, especially, as we are such hard workers and we've usually done 10 times more than what's needed to go after the thing we're going after. So when we don't get it, we're like devastated. How dare they not choose me for this? And now we get excited. So women that I've coached, we look at things and go, okay, had that been a yes, what environment would you have been in? Would you have been allowed to bring all of yourself to the table? Was there actually room for elevation? And usually we find out the answer was no. So now we get excited in the no. So when we're getting the radio silence, I told my team back in May, I could sense things were about to open up. The world was about to start finding us, but also be prepared. That means the haters are going to find you too. And on like clockwork, May 1st, it's like someone sent an army of haters and they just came from everywhere, but we were prepared for that. So we don't then see that as discouragement. That means stop. We say that a worthy opponent is worthy to be opposed. So the more opposition, it actually ends up validating why we're here. So when the haters come, we always tell them, listen, you're welcome to stay because you're actually boosting our algorithms here on social media. So stick around, but know that nothing you say is going to cause us to leave the space. You're only making us stay longer. So, just that flip, we call it reframing, right? Kind of in the corporate world and in the social space world, but we look at it as everything that we plan, we assume it will be disrupted. We still make the plan, but we release the outcome and we look for the divine interruption. We look for it. And so when it comes, we go, aha, that's the thing we never could have planned on our own. That must be the way to go. That must be the direction to go in. And I'll tell you what, there's joy and peace that comes from that. That is beyond explanation, absolutely beyond explanation.
Yes, the chat box is blowing up here. So I'm going to give, if anyone wants to take themselves off of mute, now's your time to shine.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm taking myself off of mute again because I just have another question. I'm loving this. You're so amazing. Okay, so when you're talking about purpose, I think that is an amazing way to look at it, and it's like an aha moment, right? Probably for you when you realize like that's not what purpose is. This is what purpose is. And so, how do you gauge that? How do you gauge your effect in others? Is it the way they talk to you about a certain thing? Is it the things they ask you about, or are you asking them? How did you decide that?
Couple of ways you can do it. When I'm coaching one-on-one, because we are working for speed, I give the assignment of literally asking the closest people to you, asking people who you work with, who you have kind of a more distant acquaintance, and you'll start to see themes emerge. So for me, the other way that I would do it is, what was I hearing after the concert, after the speaking engagement? So we have these long lines of people who would stand there sometimes for hours so that we can hug or do whatever we're going to do. And there was a recurring theme, and it was, I feel like I can do anything now, right? So we kept hearing that. We also kept hearing people who were creative in their past lives, but had put down their music or their art or something for their corporate career. And they were now feeling like, oh my gosh, that I was being set up to bring that creativity with me. So we'll hear that people have been sitting on something and they now had permission to either engage in that again for their own personal piece, or because it would add to the workspace they were in. And then lastly, there were a lot of people who were relating to me because I was talking about bringing all of themselves to every single table. So there were people who were saying, I didn't know I had permission to be all of me. So over time, I listen to all of that, and then I decide, okay, well, that's what I must offer from here on out. So now all of my presentations have those things in it, and I can be guaranteed of my effect. Now that means even if it's a slow day and I don't feel as energetic, even if it's a day where I'm missing more notes than usual, I can be released of the stress and the pressure that came from performing, and know that as long as I can make sure people feel like they can do anything, that they can bring all of themselves to the table, that they can resurrect parts of themselves they had put down, I was good. And let me be honest though, before, when type A, perfectionist, was only worried about the missed notes, I could miss one note or have one memory slip in a 2-hour concert experience, and the whole thing was down the drain for me. And I would leave feeling absolutely depressed, demoralized, wondering, what is my worth? If I can't even get through a Beethoven sonata without a memory slip, what's my purpose? So you can see how that opposite of thing will beat you down and destroy what you have to offer. But when I pulled real purpose out of that, then that purpose can ride out in different vehicles. So observation is going to be key to figuring out what your effect is, but you're not going to have to look that hard. You're going to hear the same things come back at you, and it's going to make you feel so excited and relieved that it's not about bottom lines and how much profit you made this month. It's just not. It's like, how did you make people feel, and what did they do because of how you make them feel? And that's we still get emails from people. And this is the this is the scary part. People will email and say, I heard you speak 3 years ago, and I went right out of there and I quit my job and I launched this business. And I'm like, oh my God, like what? But they're excited. And they did it and it works. Thank God, so people will really take action off of what you release in them. And so that's the responsibility, Mariella, that comes with, like I was saying, that preparation and that excellence, because people are listening. And they've been waiting for that permission. So when you give it to them, they're going to move. So make sure you're not BSing them. You're not recycling somebody else's motivation. Make sure you're telling them stuff that's tried and true that you've lived. Because if you deliver it correctly, they're going to move on.
Yes, I cannot. I'm throwing digital confetti right now. I hope everyone can see it. It's invisible, but I know you feel it. I'll have a follow-up question for you, because I love one of the things that you're talking about with, as far as, and I know that we can all relate on this call, and whoever is watching this video, that our economy today is all about the numbers and the data and, that bottom line that you said, if you, when you're performing and you just, you miss a beat, that turns what was amazing for everyone else and what could have been amazing for you, and you become depressed and you become, worried about the numbers and the data. How can we kind of shift our I don't want to make it such a big question as how can we shift our economy, but like, how can we balance it to where, at the end of the day, it's not only about numbers and money, and it's actually about, a little more ethical and with a little more emotional intelligence. What do you have to say on that?
Listen, the way that we talk about the economy is, how do you make it a more humane economy where more people have access to opportunity? I can't guarantee outcomes. There's nothing I can do to guarantee an outcome. Right? You know that by looking at lottery winners, right? You can throw a couple of million their way and they could still lose it all, right? Because so many other things weren't in place. But I feel like what I can do, and what leadership and government should do, is be the entity that provides access, and at the very least doesn't suppress you, oppress you, or allow systemic injustices to exist. So the way that I looked at it, like for instance, we were trying to decide whether or not to reopen, and we were presented again with a false choice: economy or saving lives. Well, to me, the economy is the people. And so my biggest concern was that if we didn't reopen powerfully, and with lots of forethought that I took, still needed at least 2 more months before we were going to open powerfully, you would risk losing more people and risk another shutdown, which would be harder to stomach. We already had people captive, right, waiting for instruction. And once we reopened, it's like letting a genie out of a bottle. it's going to be really hard to get us to shut down again. It's like, I'm not doing that again. We're moving forward. That's it. So I think the equivalency now is understanding that, for instance, corporations are people. So no need to demonize corporations because you got people who are holding up those corporations. So let's figure out, how do we have corporations be more accountable to its people? If the corporation is the representation of the American dream, that means that that dream was built on the backs of the workers in that corporation. So let's not separate the two. They are the same. Now, how do we serve both, right? And so I think it's really a nuance now, Mariella, in conversation. For instance, we talk about people who are impoverished. If we're saying always, well, they need to pull themselves up by their bootstraps and they don't want to be better and they are okay with being lazy, and we're not really examining what the situation is, that then keeps us at a stalemate that doesn't serve anyone. In Houston, we had people coming up in the food bank line here. People were coming to get food and they were driving up in Mercedes Benzes. So what you had now was people who had not had a certain life experience suddenly understanding very tangibly what it meant to be in need, what it meant to not be able to rectify your own circumstance, what it meant like to suddenly have to release all pride and partake of a government service or a community service. That was a powerful switch up. And that's going to forever change those people's perspective on what it means to be poor, not just during COVID, but every day of the year. So I think it's a new conversation now that disallows demonization. I think demonization is used so that, again, we keep people polarized. But conversation and discussion now must be opened up and it must be broader. And I think that's what people are craving, because those are the conversations we actually have in our own homes. Those are the conversations we have at lunch and over dinner. Most of us don't speak in that. You're either pro this or anti that way with the people you love. You just say, well, listen, this has been my experience. This is what I'm feeling. And someone says, I feel that way too. Even though we're on two other sides politically, we actually have this in common. So I think in terms of the economy, or whether we're looking at education, or whether you're looking at, do we need specific programs for Black Americans in the US? If we can look at it now as, okay, what do people need in order to live more powerfully and more prosperously? What will that require? Forget what color the skin is. Forget what political affiliation they have. How do we serve people? So I think the conversation comes back to reminding us that at the end of the day, we're here to solve the problems that humans have so that we can all live much better lives.
I cannot agree enough, 1000%. Actually, I have carried this theory over the years, and especially right before COVID hit, like this theory just kind of went up to the surface for me. So I'm an artist, and I believe we're all born creative beings. And I believe that just some of us kind of take a detour, just like you said, and people are like, well, my past life, I was this creative person, or they kind of have been told by educators that are overworked and underpaid that they should not do this creative thing, and they, So I've always felt that it is the role, as James Baldwin says, it's the moral responsibility of the artist to invite us to look at ourselves, to open a different dialogue so that we aren't, polarized, and so that we can march forward together essentially and evolve together. So it makes a lot of sense that an artist as yourself is wanting to be this voice that we haven't heard before. And in my opinion, that has been lacking for too long. So thank you for that, Jade. I really appreciate you.
Thank you.
So we've got about 10 minutes left. I know that we are on fire right now. I see someone else wanted to throw some digital confetti here in the chat box. So I'm just gonna hold for a light pause. If anyone has anything that they want to reflect on or any questions that they want brought up before we move on to this question on the screen, I'll hold for a light pause to see. All right, we have in the chat box, Jade rocks. Awesome. Okay. Thanks, Vivian. Great. Okay, so then if no one has anything to say, I'll just move on to this question here. So how to be great at dealing with people with a fixed mindset and create win-win situations more often? This is a great follow-up question for everything you just spoke about.
So we're on the campaign trail now, and we're working with lots of different personality types. And it wasn't until I saw this question that I actually got insight into one of the issues we've been having. And I was like, oh, that person has a fixed mindset. And we are a growth mindset team. We're all chameleons who reinvented quite a few times. And many of us, in terms of emotional intelligences, are futurist and we're relational. And so here's the big discovery I made on our last trip was it is a disaster to try to get anyone to change or become someone different in the middle of crisis, in the middle of emergency situations. You're better served as the leader to adjust around what that fixation is. And then outside of that, now that we're back home and we'll decompress and have a meeting, then you can deal with where you might need that person to consider some growth. And so what I'm trying to get better at is understanding what is the fixation around, and how can we place them in a position to be powerful, even in that fixed mindset for the time being. Because usually that person does have a very incredible skill that they're offering at the moment. But we ran into a lot of trouble trying to change each other. And we couldn't. We didn't have time to think about changing. And the changing always comes in the forms of these come to Jesus meetings, which I personally don't have a lot of tolerance for those long, let's talk about how we're feeling meetings. Those are difficult for me. That's a point of growth for me. And so I think the key aspect now is being able to accept what people do bring to the table and really work around that in the time frame that you have. And then later, when you have time for exploration, you're not up against deadlines, you can deal with what may need to be a point of growth. And then I would suggest offering one point of growth, not an entire lobotomy, right? What's the one thing that this person could just improve on or expand on that would radically change the atmosphere and the culture in which we're operating? That's what I got for that one. And that does flow into the other ones about multiphasic, and then kind of how do we deal with resumes where you're trying to position yourselves differently too, actually.
Yes. So hopefully we'll get to those. We've got about 7 minutes left. I don't want you to feel rushed though. And I do want to leave time for anyone who's live to vocalize as well. So if this is your question that you see on, oh, hi, big truck passed by. I don't know if you could hear it. Distracted me a little bit, but if this is your question and you want to, have Jade dive in deeper, please feel free to do so. So where do you find inspiration for your purpose, the reason for your reinvention, and what advice would you give to others who are looking for this inspiration?
So I talked about this a little bit with the purpose statement, right? That you're watching for your effect, you're looking for places where that effect is needed. What advice would I give to others who are looking for that? So I think as you begin to look now, we talked about how you find that purpose, but now I think the key is to look for places to offer it. And I say that, for those of us who are multifaceted, multi-talented, it's not that you have to choose which thing to do, but you get to choose which vehicle your purpose will ride itself out in this season. So it does require some decision making, right? You think about it, you can't physically be in multiple vehicles, but you can take a ride in each vehicle at a different time. And so for me, there was a season where I was riding out my purpose in the lane of ministry. I was a women's minister at my church, as well as one of the overall speaking pastors there. And there was a season that it was the priority focus, but there was another season where the music was the priority focus. But I wrote a book on prayer, right? So there was another lane still operating, but the main driving vehicle had a specific direction to go into. So I think now that we've talked about finding purpose, I think the key now will be for you to look around and see where you can offer that effect and dare to offer it without asking for permission to do so.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so let's move into this question here. Maybe this will be our last question, and then you can take us out with some food for thought and let us know how we can be in touch with you after we end this chat. So how do you become, yes, you spoke about this a little earlier, but feel free to dive in more here. So how do you become multifaceted in many different disciplines without feeling overwhelmed or like you aren't focusing on one thing at a time, especially now where, being a multitasker is this like goal for a lot of people, which I find to be very distracting. I would love to hear you speak about that.
Well, I was devastated a couple of years ago when I heard the research that says being multitasking was literally not possible. I'm like, what do you mean? I've been doing it my whole life. But the science says that your brain does not multitask. But that really what you're doing is kind of going between one thing or the other. So once I had to settle with that scientific evidence, what I realized is that I personally need change. I look forward to it. I cause it if it doesn't exist. And so for me, this is a much easier question than those who may not like to, like you said, feel distracted or taken off course. So I think the key is always to find out what phases are required, whatever the project is, right? What are the phases required? And then be honest about which phases you would function at your highest level in. So I think where we get overwhelmed is when we're taking on all the phases, especially the ones that we weren't built for. So if you're not the detail person, but you insist on being in that detailed phase, you are setting yourself up for annoyance, frustration, and overwhelm. So I feel like knowing the phases then allows us to figure out which phases, execution, delivery, and strategy are mine. I can do those three things mostly simultaneously. And they don't require a lot of brain space or energy in terms of delivery. So I can take on other phases, but that detail and that logistics and the mundane planning makes me sick to my stomach. So I now always delegate those areas. So you're still multitasking, but you're picking which task you're really good at. And I think there's no shame in that. And I think the final product ends up being much better.
And they say that when you become a parent, I am not a parent, but when you become a parent, that, you know, there's no choice. You have to learn how to juggle and do a lot of different things at once. So I would love to hear more. I know I saw your baby girl come in offline. Yeah. Is there any, do you have any words of encouragement right now for our parents, our working parents? And then also feel free to use these last 2 minutes to just wrap this chat up and send us home with some food for thought. Let us know how we can stay in touch with you and support you.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you all again for listening in. I am a proud mommy. I'm married to my high school sweetheart from Charleston. We've been together since we were 15 years old. So we have literally grown up together, and we have a 12-year-old son and a 6-year-old daughter. And what I think has been powerful for me, I could write a whole book on just raising my son, my complete opposite in many ways. I think the biggest change for me was when I finally told my family what I needed from them versus pretending like I could do everything and serve them at 100% while I was also serving these other creative babies. And I think the best advice I can give is to be honest with your spouse about what it is that you need and about who it is you really are. And especially if you are a very strong presenting personality, it's hard for people to understand where you need support. And so the bad cycle is to pretend like you don't need it, be pissed at them for not offering it, right? And then they come and go, what's wrong? Nothing, I've got it. And that cycle continues and continues, right? And I also tell my kids, so today, here's what mommy's got to really be focused on. If you give me this front part of the day and don't interrupt, you let me do this, when I'm done, here's how we'll be together. And what it does is it frees them of wondering, does mommy care? Why is she in there all day? But I have to set them up with those expectations. So the same way we do it with teams and we do it with clients, I think we have to manage expectations in our home so that we can be free to love them powerfully and not feel guilt when we're doing something else. I'll end by saying, first of all, thank you in advance for the time and the space, Mariella. This has been probably one of the most challenging things I've ever done, running for any office, but especially as president. And I think the hardest challenge we've run up against is a complete shutout where the media is concerned. They're not going to give us permission to disrupt the two-party system or the status quo. So we've had to really work around that by just having conversations like these with real people. And our ulterior motive is so that when you do see my face on CNN or Fox or whatever, you're able to say, we spent time with her, we know her heart, and whether or not wherever the vote lands is really not the issue for us. It's that we wanted to make sure there were people who could vouch for my heart and really feel like they had a heart-based connection. And so we're thankful for these moments. If you're interested in learning more about the campaign, where I stand on all the issues, you're going to go to operationrestoration2020.com. That same handle, Operation Restoration 2020, is where you'll find us on Facebook and Instagram. And do watch as we start to kind of emerge now into the mainstream. And if you like what we're saying, if you believe in the vision that we have for the nation, we would love for you to just join on with us in spreading the word, letting people know we're here, because people can't make a new decision if they don't know they have another option. So thank you all so much for your time. Thank you, Mariella, for having me.
Yes, thank you, Jade. I wish you this best of luck, and I know that you're gonna, do your thing, and I'm not worried about you. So I'm definitely going to spread the word. And thank you, everyone, for sharing time with us today. Enjoy the rest of your week.
Thank you.